Hello again, everyone. Charles Banfield here with another Karate Canucks conversation. And this time it's my great pleasure to be joined by Sensei Steven Hiscoe. Sensei Hiscoe began his martial arts journey in November of 1975 at the age of 7, studying Sensei Georges Sylvain's system of Can-Ryu Jiu-Jitsu under Sensei John Therien in Ottawa, Ontario. Shortly thereafter, his father Ed and his brother James also enrolled, making jiu-jitsu a way of life for the Hiscoe family. Fast forward to January of 1983, Sensei Hiscoe was promoted to Sho-Dan at age 14. And in 1989, now a Sandan, or third degree black belt, he commenced his career with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police and reported to the Training Academy, also known as Depot, in Regina, Saskatchewan. After the successful completion of his training at Depot, Sensei Hiscoe was transferred to Abbotsford, British Columbia, where upon arrival he discovered that there were no local jiu-jitsu schools. So as a result, he joined a local Tae Kwon Do school to continue working on his kicking skills. And he subsequently left there and joined the Abbotsford Karate Club, which trained in Shoto-Ryu Karate. It was there that Sensei Hiscoe started teaching jiu-jitsu to his karate comrades, which was an experience that would eventually lead to the founding of Hiscoe Jiu-Jitsu in 1992. In 2011, he would relaunch his dojo in Chilliwack, British Columbia, where it still operates to this day. From his professional career side of things, since 2001, Sensei Hiscoe has also been the lead instructor for the RCMP's Public and Police Safety Instructor course and is regularly consulted on the development and instruction of use of force training programs. He's also an expert in defensive tactics and firearms instruction, and throughout his 35-year career, he's risen to the rank of Staff Sergeant. Today, Sensei Hiscoe holds a Sho-Dan, or 9th degree black belt, in Can-Ryu Jiu-Jitsu. And in March of 2021, he was bestowed the title of third generation Soke of the system when his father Ed retired from teaching, who had previously been promoted to Judan, or 10th degree black belt, by old Sensei Sylvain and named as his successor. So, all that said, and apologies for stumbling over a couple of words there, welcome, Sensei Hiscoe, and thank you again for agreeing to be a part of this little project and sharing your thoughts and experiences on this podcast.
Awesome. Well, thank you for having me this morning, and it's an honor to be here and be asked.
Excellent. Yeah. So I've been looking forward to, the ramp up to our conversation over the last week or so since we started communicating. So if you don't mind, I guess we'll jump right into some of the questions here that I had prepared. So as I mentioned before, typically I like to start these conversations with some basic details and background information and so on. And I think we've already covered off where you're from and where you grew up in the Ottawa area, but can you share with us what prompted you to start your martial arts journey?
Well, I was 7 and probably came home from school one too many times, complaining maybe about being pushed around or whatnot. So my mom and dad took me to Therien Jiu-Jitsu in Ottawa, in Vanier, and that's sort of where I started. It was so long ago that through conversation, I'm sure that's with my parents. I'm sure that's what it was, and of course, all the benefits that led to it. After starting and training there.
Right. So I'm sure you would have had a few choices of systems and styles and dojos and whichever to join. Was there a specific path that led you toward jiu-jitsu, or was it just what was nearest your home?
I think it was probably what was nearest our home. We lived maybe a 10-minute walk from where the dojo was. Vanier, of course, is a very small community in the center of Ottawa. or it was at the time. And that's where the dojo was located, right on Montreal Road, like I said, which was about a 10-minute walk away from our house. So I think it was probably a little bit of convenience. And, my parents, my dad had never been involved in martial arts before. So, I don't know that there was a big, this way, that way, or the other way type of thing. But, I'm sure that they were looking for something that was self-defense based. And that was the choice they went with at the time.
Right, right. And in your backstory that you and I have kind of discussed, and maybe we'll get into this a little bit later on, but you'd indicated that what prompted you to look to the RCMP as a career path was one of the parents of one of your, I guess, training partners at the Jiu-Jitsu club. And did they have any, were there any connections there, say, with your dad or anything like that prior to joining, or was it just by chance that you ended up there?
So how I joined the RCMP is my dad and I looked after the children's program for Therien Jiu-Jitsu for several years. And I was, I think, 18 years old, 19 years old at the time. And one of the students that was in the kids program, his father was a sergeant in the RCMP. His name was Jim Good. And so Mr. Good, we're just kind of having a Saturday afternoon conversation because the kids' classes were on Friday nights and Saturday mornings. So Friday night and Saturday morning for probably 6-7 years, that's where I was. Well, more than that, because that's when my classes were as well. So probably for, close to 19 years, I spent that time in the dojo. But so Mr. Good, one Saturday afternoon said, "Steve, what are you going to do with your life? Just flat out, what are you going to do with your life?" We're having that kind of conversation. And I said, "Well, I'm going to teach jiu-jitsu." I was, addicted. I was in the dojo 4 or 5 days a week and, helping with other classes, my own classes. And so that's what I was, fully intent on doing. And he said, "Well, have you ever thought of the RCMP as a career?" And to be honest, I hadn't. My father was a firefighter. I had been, or I was at that time in the Canadian Armed Forces Reserve with the 3 Field Engineer Squadron in Ottawa. So I took the prompt and went home and talked to my mom and dad about it, and put a resume together. That would have been in March of '88. I applied. I wrote my exam in April of '88. And on the 3rd of January, 1989, I, as they say, signed on the dotted line. I think it was probably like 9 o'clock in the morning. They handed me an envelope with my plane tickets and said, "Be at the Ottawa airport at 1 o'clock this afternoon. Your flight leaves for Regina." So on the 3rd of January, 1989, that night, I was in Regina, Saskatchewan, sitting in a dorm room with 18 other guys that had just arrived the same day. So
yeah. So it was I was going to say this wouldn't be accurate. It was a quick decision. I guess it wasn't a quick decision, but it took somebody to prompt you, I guess, to look down that pathway. And
I'd never thought of being a police officer. The RCMP in Ottawa are, federal police, or plain clothes, so you don't really see them. And those that you do see are, on Parliament Hill or doing security duties of that nature. We didn't have any police officers in our family or anything like that. I wasn't foreign to wearing a uniform because I, like I said, was in the military or in the reserve at the time. And so it kind of piqued my interest. There was one brown belt who trained with us in the adult program. His name was Jerry Mitchke, and rest in peace, Jerry. He took me on a ride along, so in the Ottawa area, so we talked about it a little bit and whatnot. And so, I just thought jump in with both feet and see what happens. And next week will be 35 years complete. My retirement papers have been submitted. My last day of work will be the 23rd of February, and my last day, as they say, on the books as an official RCMP member will be the 29th of May 2024, and that will end a 35 and almost a half year career.
Wow. Wow. That's
And as I told Mr. Good, I'll be teaching jiu-jitsu full time.
yeah, something I guess that, and that's interesting. I guess something that, except for a few, pockets of time where you didn't have that capacity, but you kept that going throughout your career as well, right? Throughout your entire life to date, from the time you were 7. So.
So when I went to the police academy, a lot of, back in 1989, a lot of the things that we did were, Shotokan karate based, lunge punch, reverse punch type of things, judo throws, hold escapes. And I did a little bit of research and found out that Mr. Sylvain had been a big influence on the self-defense training the RCMP had been receiving or were delivering, because at one point the RCMP had a training facility in Ottawa, and he had been the instructor to some of those instructors at that time. And when I look back on some historical kind of lesson plans and course training standards, his name was listed as a reference and reference material on some of our RCMP lesson plans. So I thought that was pretty cool, being that he was a military police officer and also a City of Ottawa police officer, that my career was kind of going in a little bit of that same direction. So yeah.
So do you think that your experience, because when you went into the RCMP you were a third dan, at that point, do you feel that that training gave you a bit of a leg up when you were doing the going through the program at Depot, or was it just a nice to have?
I think it, obviously there were some police specific kind of things that we did and whatnot, but nothing was overly foreign. And movement wise, obviously, I'd been doing jiu-jitsu for, let's say all of my life, 13 years at that time. I guess I started when I was 7. I was there when I was 20. So I'd been doing jiu-jitsu for about 13 years. So like I said, nothing was super foreign, movement wise and whatnot. I excelled. I got 99% on my final test. They docked me a mark because they said I didn't bend my knees far enough down on my hip throw. And so that was okay. Nobody can get 100%. But I got along well with the team of instructors, and they knew where I came from, and they were all super passionate about their jobs, and I kept touch with that unit over the years. So whenever I would go to Regina, I would always go spend time with the instructors and in the self-defense gym and those kind of things. So so yeah, it was good.
And in the I guess in your introduction, I'd indicated that you are still consulted and deliver training programs and so on behalf of the RCMP.
So my current role, so in October 2nd of 2006, I transferred from the Chilliwack RCMP detachment to the Pacific Region Training Center. I moved my career into training in about 2001. I wanted to do more use of force training, more officer safety training with my colleagues. And I was told you needed to take the Public and Police Safety Instructor course. So that is the RCMP's version of a use of force instructor program. So in 1999, I successfully completed that course. I assisted on a few courses, and when the training position, because it was a one-person sort of job at the Chilliwack detachment in 2001, when the person that was there transferred and moved on, I applied for that job and got that position. So in 2001, I transitioned from being a frontline member, frontline police officer, to a training officer. So that's where my career kind of took that shift as a constable, and being able to teach other members. I got involved with teaching nationally. I was teaching on a course locally, and just for sort of context, the RCMP's training is national in nature. So whatever training is being delivered in British Columbia is the same course that is being delivered in Newfoundland. So the public and police safety instructor course, typically there's always a representative from our tactical training unit in Ottawa that travels, and they make sure that the standards of the course are the same wherever that course is delivered. So was friends with the coordinator. I was helping them out on a course in Chilliwack, of course, because I was local to the Chilliwack area. And they asked if I'd be interested in helping out on some other courses. So of course I said, yeah, absolutely. Let me know when and where. I'll check with my bosses. So the next day they came back and said, if you're available, we have a course in, I can't remember what month it was. And I said, yeah, absolutely. Where is it? Fredericton, New Brunswick. So like, awesome. Who's going to be running the self-defense portion? So who am I going to be helping? And I said, well, if you're able to make it, it's you. So that was my sort of first lead role in looking after all the defensive tactics portion for that course. Mm-hmm. And I think over the next several years, 5 or 6 years, I delivered on over 22 national courses. I helped develop other people to take over my role as lead instructors. And then in 2006 is where I went to the training academy in Chilliwack. And the reason I went there was they were just coming out with a new program, which is called block training. Block training is all of our mandatory use of force training components in a 5-day block. So it just means block training just means you have a block of time to deliver all of those mandatory. So your annual firearms qualifications, your OC spray, defensive baton, karate control, scenario-based training, and any other sort of things that all operational members need to have in their sort of repertoire of training. So I went there to help not so much develop the training, but implement the training. So how are we going to deliver this to 5,500 members in British Columbia? Mm-hmm. And so that program is still sort of in place. It's kind of taken some changes. The ownership has been taken over by our national headquarters, but essentially every RCMP member in BC comes to Chilliwack once every 3 years to be recertified in all of their mandatory training. So I started as an instructor. I moved up to a team leader, so looking after 4 or 5 other instructors. Then I moved up to the unit manager, so I was responsible for everything that had to do with delivering block training, in addition to taser instructor training, active shooter training, the public and police safety instructor course, so anything that was use of force related. I moved over to the firearm side after the fact. So when the RCMP sort of came out with carbines, so after Marathorpe and Moncton, where we had members that were murdered, and Spiritwood, we finally adopted a carbine program. And my role at the academy at the Pacific Region Training Center was to figure out how are we going to, again, not develop the training, but roll out the training to all of our frontline members in BC. So I took on that task and then some other firearms tasks. So now currently my position is I look after both the use of force and the firearms units. I don't do much teaching. I don't do any teaching anymore, but I manage both of those units and programs. And I have about 60 instructors below in my org chart that actually deliver the training.
Okay. Well, so in terms of the hand-to-hand aspect of it, obviously the taser training and so on would be outside of a typical jiu-jitsu or martial arts program, right? You don't see many dojos that train with tasers, at least not in Canada. But the hand-to-hand aspect of it, like in your opinion, was that training that was developed, I guess, at the national level and then delivered across the country? Like where in your opinion did you think that fell? Like was it solid? Was it in need of tweaks? Did you have an opportunity to offer suggestions and tweaks and that kind of thing? Or
so really, to be honest, there was no hand-to-hand aspect of our recertification. So you went to Regina, you got your 6 months of basic training. You were exposed to, I don't know how many hours, 100+ hours of, your self-defense training, if we call it that. And then when you went to your detachment, where now we are talking about in-service training, right? So you're not a recruit, you're not a cadet, you're now a fully functional member of the RCMP. So at that time, there was no hand-to-hand training. It was OC spray, your defensive baton, and karate control. And that was it. So through progression and the years, our members became reliant on those tools, right? It's kind of like a carpenter, I guess. If you're not relying on your tape measure or whatnot, then you kind of lose that skill, because you're always going to default to something else. So what was happening is we were constantly defaulting to using our pepper spray, using our baton, and in grievous bodily harm circumstances, then you could apply a karate control. Although when I started, somebody said something you didn't like, you spun them around, you put them to sleep, and in the back of the police car they went. That's not the way things are done anymore. So now, fast forward to 2018, 2019, our program has changed. So now there is more striking, basic striking, jab, cross, movement. We have standing grappling now, where you're in close proximity. How can you get somebody on the ground? How do you control them? And we have ground grappling where, somebody you're mounted on somebody, or somebody is mounted on you, or you have them in guard, and how do you deal with those situations? But also remembering that when you're a police officer, you're in uniform. There are always weapons there because you brought them there, right? There's always, whatever fight you find yourself in, there's going to be a gun because you brought it there. There's always going to be something else. So the idea is not to get into a submission sort of, wrestling match or grappling match. The idea is to get back to your feet, create that distance, and deal with the situation from there. So yes, so that has always been something we've required, and now people are recognizing it. Research based. So a lot of our training is research based, evidence based. So when we look at officer injuries over, X number of years, suspect injuries over X number of years, where do those things fall in? Where does that gap, where is that gap? So that's why now our training is kind of moving back to having some components of physical self-defense in it. So hands-on, not just relying on your OC spray, your baton, those kind of things. So based on evidence and, data, we have a system where, if you are involved in a situation, it's reported, it's cataloged and dated, and we're able to kind of develop training from there.
So as part of this evidence-based approach, psychological, And what I mean by that is, and I know that you know Sensei Bill Wolf because he referred you to me.
Yeah, great guy.
And yeah, and he and I had well, on camera we had a really good conversation, but off camera as well we had a few interesting pieces of information exchange, or I was absorbing it, I guess he was providing. And one of the things that he talked about is the importance of training assertive confidence. And this is what this hand-to-hand kind of training provided, to the first Special Services Force back in the Second World War, and the British Commandos prior to that, and the system that he teaches and so on is to provide this assertive confidence to police officers, to military personnel, to security personnel. Does that factor in at all to this approach to training, or is it more of a technical aspect? Well, if I do this, I can control somebody, as opposed to.
Yeah, great question. It's for us anyways, it's a fine balance, right? Is the people that come to our course are mandated to be there, right? So, and you got to think our workforce is made up of many, many, many different types of people. So, we try and get them into that mindset that, I'll be blunt, when the shit hits the fan, you've got to do what you've got to do to sleep in your own bed that night, right? You have to win, you have to survive that encounter. So, we definitely try and impose that and get that across to our members. But not everybody, I'll say, is a frontline member. So some people are police officers, but work in a detective setting or in a forensic setting or whatnot. So they don't have that, maybe I'll say they're not required to kind of have that mindset because their duties don't put them into those situations where they would have to have that mindset. So it's not something that is like in your face. It's not something that, we really kind of push and push and push. But definitely there are some aspects of that when we're talking and getting the techniques across and whatnot. I know for myself, when I first started doing it, I was very much kind of like, Bill Wolf and, with our class and whatnot. And it's funny because then you get the comments from the students that it's too aggressive, it's too this, it's too that, right? So, sometimes we got to pull back our language a little bit, or, it's great to be passionate as an instructor and get that passion across and whatnot, but it's not for everybody. So, so there, we discuss it, but it's not a huge part of our discussions, I guess.
Yeah. So back to my original question then, I guess. So this doesn't really factor into the evidence-based aspect of it, like the psychological impacts are not a center, not a focus. Like, you want to be technically proficient, but the mindset has to be something that you bring to it yourself, right?
Yeah, you kind of got to work on that. Like I said, it's not part of it. We try and impress it upon our candidates. Look, you're on your back and somebody's on top of you. Why are they there? How did they get there? Right? Did you get punched in the face and now they're mounted on top of you, and that, attack is going to keep going? You kind of have to, and if you don't approach the techniques with kind of that mindset, then you're not getting the full value of the training either, right? I think it's kind of like in the dojo. You can go through the motions and learn the technique, or you can, learn those techniques with, passion and controlled aggression and really putting some effort into it. People will say, well, do I get a workout doing jiu-jitsu? Do I get a workout doing karate? Or, I remember seeing a guy doing Tai Chi, and he had sweat pouring off the end of his nose. And it's the intensity and the effort that you put into it. So it's the same thing here, I think, is, we have some candidates that come in and they go through the motions, and we have other candidates that really come in and are like, hey, you know what, I need to learn this because I'm frontline cop and I'm out there dealing with, you know, stuff every single day, and I recognize the value that if I find myself in a situation, I need to get back up to my feet. So I'm going to go through this with controlled aggression, with, you know, intensity, with passion, or, you know, whatever you want to call it.
So, as somebody who has spent, you know, several years as a law enforcement officer and also as an instructor of martial arts, and, you know, martial arts programs are, I guess, to distill it down, you know, centered around teaching people how to fight, how to do harm to other people, or to, you know, prevent themselves from getting injured while others are doing harm to them. How do you kind of incorporate for civilians? How do you incorporate the, you know, the use of force, to use that term that we used previously regarding police officers and so on, in the dojo? Like, how do you keep people out of your students out of situations where they might find themselves in a dueling scenario where they could be, you know, subject to not just physical harm but also legal jeopardy, right?
So to me, it all comes down to being able to articulate your actions, right? So we teach things in the dojo that maybe if a student did that out in, you know, in public, or they found themselves in a situation, you know, would be maybe frowned upon, or, you know, if the individual they're defending themselves against decides to go to the police and say, hey, you know, this person assaulted me or whatnot. You know, our students know how to defend themselves physically, but I think they also need to know how to defend themselves verbally, if you want to call it that, or after the fact. You know, we refer to the triers of fact. So, you know, all of a sudden you're arrested, or the police show up at your door and they want to know what happened. I always sort of tell my students in that if you can speak the same language as the person you're speaking to, it's going to make it that much, you know, easier. And in policing, at the end of the day, it's kind of the same thing. If you use force, you're going to have to articulate why you did what you did. So, so with my students, I probably need to do it more often, but I try and educate them to being able to articulate their actions, building their risk assessment. So when we talk about building a risk assessment, we talk about situational factors, right? So what factors influence what you did? Where were you? What was your environment? Are you in the parking lot of you know, Canadian Tire on Christmas Eve and the place is jam packed? You know, did you pull into a parking space and, you know, the guy that was in front of you wanted that parking space, and now you're in a parking lot kind of confrontation? Is it you know, New Year's Eve and you're leaving a bar and it's, you know, snowing and the ground is you know, is icy, and like where do you find yourself, right? Is there more than one person that you are engaged with? Did you walk out of the 7-Eleven and there's a group of you know, teens there, and one of them purposely bumps your shoulder to try and get you into a situation type of thing, right? So what are those, you know, situational factors that you find yourself in? And then we talk about, well, what was the person's behavior, right? So, you know, typically if we're talking, you know, with civilians, it's probably going to be an assaultive kind of behavior. You know, so the person wants to fight. They're telling you that they want to fight. They're telling you they're going to, you know, kick your ass or whatever it might be. They're showing you with their fists and the expression on their face that they want to fight. Or maybe it's more than that. Maybe they have a weapon, and now we're talking about grievous bodily harm, or, you know, the potential of death that, you know, comes with that weapon being used or whatnot, right? And we talk about our own perceptions of the situation, and that's where we personalize that situation. So you may, you know, this set of situational factors, you know, might be there, and the same behavior But if we put two different people in that situation, they might respond differently. So based on their experience, based on their upbringing, based on the training that they have, based on, maybe you've been in that situation before, and the last time I tried to do this, it didn't go so well. So this time I'm going to try something else, right? I tell people we all carry around a bag of experience with us. And experience is something that you get right after you need it, right? And then our tactical considerations. So can I leave the situation? Is there other people there that can help me? Do I need to, call a friend, as they say? Like, what other options do I have to deal with that sort of situation? So, when somebody is asking, well, why did you do this? Those are kind of the things that, we want to be being able to articulate to that person asking the questions. Not just, well, he had his hands up and he told me he was gonna do this, so I punched him in the face, I kicked him in the balls, or whatever it might be, right? Because especially if you've injured that person, right, is you're going to have to really be able to articulate again why you did what you did, and at the end of the day, is after that articulation, after you've painted the picture with your words, you want that person on the other side of the desk or wherever you might find yourself to go, I understand why you did what you did. That's the ultimate, goal of it, right? So,
yeah. And that it was reasonable in the circumstances as opposed to a reaction, an emotional reaction. Okay.
Yeah. I mean, give you an example, like even in our jiu-jitsu style, somebody grabs you by the wrist, you pull your hand out of the wrist, you give him an elbow to the body, you smack him in the groin, you give him a hip throw, you drop your knee into the rib cage, and you stomp on your head, right? Because the person grabbed you by the wrist. So in kind of the, the camera aspect of it, right? Everybody's got a cell phone camera nowadays, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it'd be like, oh my God, did you see that? Because what is the potential for injury from hip throwing somebody or for throwing somebody on pavement, right?
Yeah.
If they don't know how to break fall and they smash their head on the ground, if a broken hip maybe, or a smashed up knee or something from that impact with the ground, what's the potential for injury from that knee drop to the rib cage or from the stamping kick to the head, right? So, from that camera friendly or unfriendly view, but maybe the guy grabbed you by the wrist, let's say you're a female and they grabbed you by the wrist and it was like they start pulling you into the bushes or something, or they've said something to you, or they grab you by the wrist and that other hand is reaching down behind their back. What are they reaching for? Are they reaching for a knife because now they've got you controlled by one wrist and they're going to, stab you in the guts with a knife or something? So those are all kind of the things that you want to be able to articulate, not just the guy grabbed me by the wrist, said he didn't like the way I, looked at him or whatever, and then I did all of these things, right? And I think that's why there are multiple ways to get out of certain situations, and based on whatever that situation you find yourself in, you need to have the appropriate response to that, right? But of course, there has to be a starting point, and there has to be a progression for those students to learn from, right?
Right.
So, yeah.
Do you have like special sessions or special times within your sessions carved out to cover just that, or is it kind of an anecdotal thing that pops up?
I try and, maybe once a year or something is just have kind of that one class where that's what our discussion, or a couple of classes where that's going to be our discussion. Personally, I have it in my student manual, where they can read as well. So the situational factors are sort of broken out into, different categories, the behaviors, the perceptions and the considerations are all kind of written out, and more of in a, quasi-civilian sort of application type of thing. We talk about the 7 in policing. We call them the 7 tactical principles. In my dojo, I just call them the 7 safety principles, or say it's 7 safety considerations. So, things like cover and concealment. So cover is something that protects you from somebody's weapons, right? So if somebody's shooting at you, you want to get behind something that's going to stop bullets. And concealment is something that protects you from their view. And cover can be concealment, but concealment can't be cover, right? So we'll talk to them, hey, you're walking through the mall and all of a sudden, somebody starts shooting the place up. Where do you want to be? Well, you want to be somewhere that's going to protect you from whatever that weapon is, right? Or you end up in a situation where somebody is coming at you with a knife. Is there something that you can put between you and that person to either, a barricade or like a car or something that will slow them down to get to you, right? So cover, threat, we talk about threat cues. So a threat cue is something that should raise your level of alertness. So again, let's say we're in front of that 7-Eleven and somebody says, hey, give me your money, give me this, give me that. That should raise your level of alertness that shit's going down, right? Or somebody says, hey, I'm going to kick your ass, right? That should raise your level of alertness. Or so it could be verbal and it could be nonverbal. So, the person that blades their position, in the old days, you saw them take their hat off or take their jacket off. Well, why is that person doing that? Well, they don't want to damage their hat or their jacket when they're going to be rolling around, fighting type of thing, right? Somebody, walking towards you is funny because, your perception. So if I said somebody walking towards you with their hands up, somebody would go, oh, so he was surrendering? Like, no, they came at me and they had their hands up in a fist right? So when we're talking about painting that picture is being accurate with your description and your adjectives and, the look on their face. I could see the veins in their neck or, their face was, the muscles in their face were clenched or whatnot. Mm-hmm. So those are kind of those, threat cues type of thing. Cover the threat time. So time and distance. We talk to our students about, never being too close to somebody. So if you do get into that, physical confrontation or, that verbal confrontation to begin with, don't be in somebody's face because it's not going to take much for them to, get their first shot in. You want to have that distance. We've all heard about getting into somebody's face. Practice not getting into somebody's face. Practice being away because the more distance you have from that person, the more time you're going to have to react to whatever that attack coming in is as well. The other part is, when we were talking about that, that feeling, that, aggressive feeling or whatnot. Well, when I'm right in somebody's face, unless I'm the aggressor, if I'm kind of on the receiving end, I'm going to feel a little bit intimidated. I'm going to feel, more like I am in danger and I don't have that time. So the more distance you have, the more calm you have to be, right? You can make a better decision on the reaction or on what you want to do, those kind of things, right? Cover the threat in time. 1 + 1. So we always talk 1 + 1 is don't let your guard down. If there's one bad guy, there's potentially another bad guy. If there's one weapon, there's potentially another weapon, right? So if I'm, defending myself against one person, have I looked around? Is there somebody that's going to be, grabbing me from behind or whatnot? Is this a 2-on-1 situation? Is it a 3-on-1 situation? So when we're doing our training, after you've created your distance or got the guy on the ground, we want you to step back and look around. And we can't always train 2-on-1, 3-on-1, but we can mentally train ourselves to be looking for those things. So I'll tell my students, when you step back, what do? We look around. What are you looking for? I'm looking for an escape. I'm looking for, is there a car coming? Like if I'm on the sidewalk and I just stepped out onto the street, am I going to get hit by a car? Am I in a parking lot? Like all of those other factors that might, be there. Cover the threat in time. 1, verbal. Are you this is one thing that we don't do in the dojo. We don't do our techniques and verbalize, right? Like somebody grabs you in a bear hug and we teach them to kind of smash on the back of the hands. Well, we're doing a ki. We're not saying, hey, let me go, right? So, or trying to calm the situation down using our words and those kind of things, right? And we talk about de-escalation. So again, not so much in our words, but can I just leave the situation? Can I just get myself out of there? Does my intuition, right? We kind of use an example of, you're policing and you're by yourself. You walk into a bar full of bikers. Is that the best place for you to be? Maybe not. Maybe you want to leave and call other people to come and, right, support you. So, we'll talk to our students about, you walk into a house party, teenagers, right? You walk into a house party and all of a sudden there's, drugs being done and booze and stuff. And it's like, is that really the best place for you to be? What good could happen from you being here, right? Maybe
Yeah.
not much. Remove yourself from that situation. And then we talked about what we're talking about with, with Bill Wolf, that survival mentality, right? So, that I'm always going to win. I'm going to do what I can. I'm going to fight till I can't fight anymore type of mentality. But I also talked to them about 6+1 is 7, right? So if I pay attention to the other 6 safety considerations, then maybe I don't have to use that survival mentality all the time. I'm not going or to its fullest extent. I was looking for cover. I was paying attention to what the person was saying, all of these things. All of that together is having a survival mindset, right? So those are some of the things that we try and talk to our students about is, paying attention to those kind of things.
So, as somebody has had an extensive career as a police officer and so on, do you have any advice that you would provide to somebody who's considering a career as a police officer in terms of their physical and mental preparation, and where would the martial arts kind of flow into that?
So I think, so first of all, when you apply, they want to see that you're somebody who is a learner and a lifelong learner. Because when you get into policing, that's all it's going to be. You're going to be learning every single day. So, I think it doesn't matter I shouldn't say it doesn't matter what you're learning, but it matters that you are ongoing learning. And to me, yes, martial arts, being physical, there's so much research that shows that exercise and being physical is good for your mental health. And getting into policing, we have many members that suffer from PTSD and those kind of situations and mental health, based on the things that you're going to see in your policing career, right? Like I was 21 years old. I'd never seen a dead live body, right? So I've been on the job literally a year. Like I signed on the dotted line January 3rd of 89. Well, on January 3rd of 1990, I saw my first dead body. And it was nothing traumatic in the sense that it wasn't like a shooting or a stabbing. It was just somebody passed away of natural causes, but they'd been there for a few days. So they're a little bit bloated and, things that happen to deceased bodies. But that ingrains an image on your brain. I was, again, in my early 20s. I'd never been in a long-term relationship. And, you go to domestic disputes, right? Where, one party is injured, the other party or whatnot. Suicides, attempted suicides, all of those kind of things. Those are all things that a frontline police officer goes to. And those are all things that are going to burn an image on your brain. And if you don't have that outlet of either speaking to somebody about it, the physicality, like going out and exercising and keeping your body strong and keeping your mind strong, are all things that are going to have an impact. When we talk about martial arts specifically, and, if we go back to the beginning of our conversation, you will receive mandatory training once every 3 years, right? Like your self-defense training, your recertification once every 3 years. If you value your safety, And if you value your family and being able to protect them and going home at night, well, sometimes you have to make an investment in your own safety. And that is seeking out training outside of the organization's training that they provide you on a mandatory basis. Because it's not going to be, for some people, that's all they need. But, for some people, it's not all they need, right? So I think, having that investment in your own safety and whatnot is super important. And going into the career with those habits, right? So for me, yes, martial arts has always been part of my life. Working out has not always been part of my life, right? And, I got much heavier for a portion of my service, depending on what type of job I was doing. If I was a frontline member, then you're active all the time. If you're on certain duties, you're not. So looking after your body in that respect as well is super important. So,
yeah. So in your experience, do police forces tend to look favorably on people that have a martial arts background, or is it not really held up in any special way?
I'm not 100% certain how recruiters look at it. I just know that, they're looking for people that are in shape, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when you show up to your interview, it's like anything else. If you show up to your interview and you look fit, then then that's a good thing for you.
Yeah.
If you show up and you're not fit, that's not going to be a good thing, because, especially, I can only speak to the RCMP, but I know that going to Regina for 6 months is physically demanding. And, when I was there, not again, I don't know if this is the same, but, if let's say you have your slate of university courses, and if you are behind in one subject, well, it's expected that you're going to be in the library, or you're going to be in the gym, or you're going to be in the pool, or you're going to be wherever you are, making yourself better at that.
Yeah.
So if you have multiple things that you need to get better at, you're going to have a difficult 6 months, because you're going to be busy, 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 right?
Yeah.
And so having, that physical fitness, that martial arts background, I think is super important. Does it put somebody, if you were to put two people side by side, one that has it, one that doesn't have it, does one leapfrog the other? I don't know. But it definitely, as an individual, I think maybe favors you for sure.
Yeah. There's a lot of other factors obviously involved there, right? But
Yeah.
okay. So looking back on your both your martial arts and your professional career, is there, if you could do it all over again, is there anything that you would do differently, or is there anything that you know now that you wish you knew sooner when you were?
Yeah, great questions. I have to say I've been fairly lucky in my career. I've had opportunities, but jiu-jitsu has always kept me in BC. My dojo's always kept me here. But I've had great opportunities in the training world and to travel and stuff. If I were to do anything different, I don't know that I would, because I've been very happy with my career. I think it would be recognizing that things happen for a reason. Although I've had a good career, I've also had disappointments in my career where, I remember early on wanting this one position, and it was, working in a plainclothes position. And I was spending a lot of time with the guys and volunteering my own time and learning about the job and everything. And not knowing the process, the HR process that goes on, somebody else parachuted into that job, right?
Yeah.
So disappointment. But then something happened not long after that, I got a better position. I think it's being prepared for the unexpected, and this persevering, through type of thing. Even being at the training academy, I had been acting as the unit manager for a while, and the same thing. 2 other people came in and took over the jobs. So now I had no position at that time and potentially would have had to leave. And, I'll be honest, I was bitter about that and let everybody know about it. But kind of like the conversation with Jim Good that got me into the RCMP, I had another conversation with a senior manager, and it was kind of like, if you're done this behavior, if you're done bitching about what's happened, we can get to work. If you're not, we can find you another place to go work. And so it was like, okay. So I was done, and it led to like an even better, future than I thought. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going in knowing that there's going to be some highs, there's going to be some lows, and how you deal with those, disappointments of your career and whatnot.
So as a martial artist, then, do you have a proudest moment or achievement, or a most prominent kind of eureka moment, where suddenly something made sense for you?
I think a couple of proudest moments. One is obviously being promoted to first degree black belt at the same time as my dad. That was, same day, tested on the same day. I think that was huge, for us as a family. We've always bonded over jiu-jitsu. We got promoted to fifth Dan at the same time from Mr. Sylvain. And, that was, again, was a great accomplishment or an honor. Another one would be, bringing Mr. Sylvain back into jiu-jitsu. When he retired from Algonquin College and was looking for, what his future path was going to be, we had discussions with him and whatnot to kind of bring him back. And, which he did come back and took, was teaching our black belt classes and things like that, and promoting him to 10th Dan. Because Mr. Sylvain was an 8th Dan, and although he was the founder of Can-Ryu Jiu-Jitsu, had never self-promoted himself up to, that rank. That was done by his, most senior students and whatnot. So being part of that process to have him recognized, and Mr. Sylvain being a very sort of humble individual, we didn't know if he was going to accept it or not accept it. And, he did. And right after the presentation, okay, let's get to work. Like, it's jiu-jitsu time, right? But that to me was a proud moment, is being able to be part of the group that recognized him and promoted him to 10th Dan. And just operating my school, I'm super proud of my students. And, I have some pretty amazing up and coming teenagers and students, and just, to me, that's a big accomplishment, and being able to see where some of my past students are in their lives right now. And, and I think, like most martial arts instructors, well, hopefully like most martial arts instructors, we get those little comments from parents every once in a while, like, you've done so much for my child, or, thank you for teaching my child, and, their progress in school, or it's not for me. I've taken a different approach to my dojo and how I sort of bring students in and whatnot. And it's not about the physical. It's not only about the physical teaching and whatnot. It's trying to develop the whole child, right? So the physical, the intellectual, the emotional, the social, and trying to get all of those things into their classes so that the parents really see the benefits of training in martial arts, and how their child's behavior maybe has been redirected at school, and kids that are constantly being in the principal's office now that haven't been in the principal's office for 6 months, or they've gone the whole school year without getting themselves into trouble, or their grades are improving, or So to me, that's a big piece where you recognize that you're directly having a positive impact on your student base and the kids that are in your school.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely fulfilling and rewarding when you get that kind of feedback. Yeah, and just following on the last piece that you talked about, what in your opinion would you say is the best single best reason for anyone to start training in the martial arts, regardless of what that art is?
Yeah, I even ask my students, why are you here?
Mm-hmm.
It's nobody, maybe one, but not many people say, well, I'm here to learn to defend myself. It's, I need help with confidence, discipline, self-discipline, fitness. I just want to make new friends, right? All of these kind of things. So, when we talk to the parents, and before I take any new students, I do a one-on-one with each family. So when they come in, I ask them, why do you want your child in my classes? And sometimes it's because a child is being bullied, but it might be they're being bullied because they have no confidence. So then it comes back to that confidence issue, right? Or the discipline issue, or so to me, those are the big factors that when people come in, that's what they're looking for. In the adult class, again, it's not a lot of times. It's adults aren't getting into fights on a everyday basis. It's not that they need to learn how to fight. They're looking for a different form of exercise. They may be tired of running on the treadmill, or going to the gym, and they want an exercise that has a skill base to it, or they're just looking to make a new circle of friends or a place to belong, or those kind of things.
So for you then, what's kept you involved in it for the past 40 plus years?
Yeah, I think it's having that impact on people. Look, I think for my family, when I look at my dad was at 18, maybe even before that, was a paramedic. They own my grandfather and my dad owned the ambulance service for the Ottawa area, Twin City Ambulance. Before there was a provincial ambulance service, there were private ambulance services. So my grandfather and my dad owned a private ambulance service. Then my dad was a firefighter. So both of those things are careers that help people, are careers that were, when people are in distress or whatnot, they're going to get called. So for me, I think it kind of bled down into that. So as a police officer, your number one thing is public safety and helping people that maybe can't help themselves or whatnot. And I view the same thing as a jiu-jitsu instructor, martial arts instructor. You're there to help people who need that help. And again, in whatever those things that we just talked about, right? Confidence, discipline, self-discipline, all of those things. You're helping the parents who are trying to help their child, that are making an investment in their child's future and whatnot. So for me, I think a lot of it has been taking that piece of being a protector, being, someone in the policing world. Yes, when I first started my policing career, it was helping the public stay safe. In the latter stages of my career, it's been helping police officers stay safe through instructor development. And then in my jiu-jitsu career, or my jiu-jitsu identity, is kind of doing that with my students. Obviously, I've met many amazing people, and I get to travel to many places. And now with retirement coming up, it's going to allow me to do that a little bit more. I'm going to be in Ontario a few times over the next 6 months. I'll be in North Bay teaching at Chris Marceau's martial arts camp there in the middle of March, and then we'll have a Canadian Jiu-Jitsu Union camp in May. So just the opportunity to travel and meet new people and sort of get the word out there.
So here's a question that I like to ask as many of the peoples that I'm privileged to speak with about. In your opinion, what does a black belt mean to you? And should there be a minimum age to achieve a first degree black belt rank?
So for me, it's kind of a hypocritical question, because I know a lot of people at like 16, right? Like 16, you can't be a black belt till you're 16. And I look back, depending on which martial art, I guess, but I look back on I was 14 when I got my black belt, right?
Yeah.
And so, I don't have that minimum age requirement at my school. By default, I probably do. But then we go back to, what's a black belt? One, I think getting to a black belt means that you've demonstrated the basic knowledge of whatever your system is. It's basic. It's a first degree black belt. So to me, it's that you've mastered, or you've been able to demonstrate, the basics of your system. And then as you progress, then, we progress with what the system is, and maybe it's variations and, those kind of things. That's kind of on a physical piece. And maybe from the intellectual piece is, can you maybe teach some of those things, right? Is you've been able to demonstrate them all, and that's super awesome, but can you get the message across? Can you get the message across to a class? Mm-hmm. So even if it's teaching a hip throw, or, teaching a bear hug, or a wrist grab, or a wrist lock, or something of that, can you get that across in a way that somebody who's never done that technique before is going to understand it, or is going to be able to do it? So, that's kind of the physical, the demonstration, the intellectual piece. Can you teach some of those things, right? Again, probably at a basic level. But for us, you've probably been doing jiu-jitsu 3, 4, 5 years. By the time you get to that black belt level, minimum, let's say 3 years. So you've been through a ton of classes. You should be able to replicate what your instructor has, done when he's teaching those classes.
Yeah.
From an emotional standpoint, we talked about previously, is being able to keep your cool, have that controlled aggression, in your training and whatnot, and not going overboard, right? And from the social aspect, well, again, I expect my black belts to be role models for the other people in my school. Here's how we conduct ourselves in the dojo. Here's how we train hard when we're on the mat, right? We don't spend half the class chit-chatting with our partner. We're here to train. We train, we sweat, whatever it is. And outside of the school, what kind of individual are you, right? For me, I tell my students, you wear my crest. I am a police officer. So if you end up in a situation, I don't want to be, the school that has a reputation that I'm teaching bullies, or I'm, those kind of things. So, you have an overall responsibility here as well to the school, not just to yourself, type of thing. So I think that's kind of part of where, I see being a black belt. Maybe that's a little bit more philosophical than reality, but that's kind of where I would like to see, my black belts coming up. I've got a couple of pretty amazing 16-year-olds that'll be doing their black belts next year. They've been with me for 10 years. They've gone through our 3 and 4-year-old program, our 5 and 6-year-old program, our 7 to 9-year-old program, our 10 to 13-year-old program. They both got to a junior black belt, and now they're working on their adult black belt. They help me. They, teaching classes and stuff like that. And they're both going to be, super awesome. So that's kind of where I see, that black belt level being. And do I see a minimum? I never looked at a minimum. I was always, if you can demonstrate to the ability that I want to see things, then you deserve it. And, but the way that I've structured my program in my school, I'll never have somebody who is going to be, let's say, an adult black belt before they're 16 years old anyways.
Yeah.
So just by the way, like I said, that I've structured my curriculum and whatnot, my business model, if you want to call it that.
Yeah. Yeah. So back when you earned yours, this would have been back in the early 80s and so on. And
yeah,
martial arts in Canada was, it was here, but it wasn't in its current form. Obviously it was still evolving and so on. Was there a different curriculum for somebody that was your age? You started at 7, you were training with all the adults, or was there a kids classes and so on?
Yeah, we had kids classes, right? But the curriculum was, as far as I can remember, because that's a long time ago, was the same, right? Like I don't remember doing a different test than the adults that were on the mat doing their test at the same time. So although the kids trained together and the adults trained together, when it came time to that black belt grading, if I recall, I can't remember how many. There might have been like a dozen people on the mat at the same time that were maybe doing their test or whatnot. And we were all on the mat at the same time. So, yeah. And I think, and that's like, for me, like I said, the way my program is structured, research over the years and, child development research and those kind of things, have play a huge role, I think, in like it does in my school. All of our age categories are broken out. We don't put, 7-year-olds with 12-year-olds. We kind of take the approach. It's kind of like going to school. You don't put kids that are in grade 1 and kids that are in grade 4 in the same class together. Physically, intellectually, emotionally, socially, they're not at that same stage of life. Their development is not equal. So that's why we kind of group them together, and then we group our teens and our adults together. So we don't have kind of the 10-year-olds training with the 14 or the 15-year-olds and whatnot. So,
do you have a favorite technique or concept? Or maybe a different way to ask the question is, do you have a most important concept that you carry as a bit of a beacon for yourself and when you're teaching?
Simplicity. I always kind of talk about there's two sides to jiu-jitsu, or maybe there's two sides to Can-Ryu Jiu-Jitsu. I put it like that. There's the simple side, and then there's the art of jiu-jitsu. There's self-defense, and then there's the art. I love the art of jiu-jitsu. I like the fancy techniques. I like the flash and those kind of things. But if I'm, let's say, going to a seminar, if we put it in that kind of context, if I'm going to be going and teaching at a camp, I'm going to be teaching simple things that people will be able to retain and take with them. So it could be simple takedowns. It could be, there's a concept that I really like. My students have sort of dubbed it Armageddon. It's kind of like just controlling the arm, right? Controlling the arm. So whichever position you can get to is controlling kind of that one arm. It's kind of like knife defense, right? It's kind of like the cycling of that arm back and forth. If you can isolate the elbow and the elbow doesn't pull back anymore, now you have good control of that elbow and you're sort of stopping that motion. So, working on that concept, because there's so many different things that you could work on, right? But simplicity for me is number one, especially with new students coming in, or if I'm going, like I said, I'm going to go somewhere and teach something for the first time, it's going to be something simple. When you go to a camp, there are many camps out there. I'm sure you've been to a ton of them as well. Is that, you pay a lot of money to go, and at the end of the weekend, what do you remember, right? This guy did
usually
this.
The dinner.
What's that?
Usually the dinner after the banquet.
Right? Absolutely, right? So it's kind of like, if I can show them something that is simple enough that they're going to remember and be able to take or even apply into their own sort of, background and training and whatnot, then I think I've achieved something. One of the things I try and do as well is always teach from a lesson plan. So I have a list of lesson plans. Like I said, I've been to certain camps a couple of times, and I keep, here's what I taught the first time. Here's what I taught the second time. Here's what I taught the third time. So I try not to teach the same thing more than once at that same location. Again, people come in, they pay, and I don't want them to go, oh, there's Steve. I know what he's going to teach. He's going to do this again, or he's going to do that again, right? I don't want to be kind of that one trick pony where you come in and this is all you ever teach, right? I want to try and keep it exciting and moving forward for the people that are attending and stuff. So yeah, so always trying to be the professional instructor, and it doesn't matter what type of instructor you are. You should always be professional in your development and in your delivery. And I think teaching from a lesson plan assists in that professional demeanor or that professional background of that instructor. And lesson plans helps keep you on track and make sure that you don't always deliver the same thing, and keep things fresh and keep people kind of wanting more from you rather than, I know what he's going to teach. He was here last year. He did this. He was here the year before that. Did exactly the same thing, right? So,
what advice would you have for anyone who's considering starting into a martial art, whether it's for themselves or for the children or whichever? So, is there anything that you would say that they should look for, or like either red flags or positive aspects?
I think when people come in, I ask them what they're looking for. Some want sport, right? Some want competition. That's not me. I'm not your school. Go to this school, go to that school, that they're competition based, or they go to competitions. If you're looking for self-defense, then awesome. So one, go around, kick the tires, see what determine what it is that you're looking for, first of all, right? And then go in and speak with the instructor, or go in and see the school. That's why I do a one-on-one with every family that comes in. I want to build that connection with them. I want to find out why you want to be part of my school. How can I help you? It might be also that I don't want you as part of my school because your thought process doesn't match my thought process, right? Is you are, you're way over here and I'm way over here, and I don't think we're going to meet in the middle here anywhere. So, I suggest you find another school, right? So trying to build that connection first of all. So I think by going in and talking to the instructor, finding out about their school, having a look at their school, maybe even sitting in on a class and seeing how the instructor sort of manages his class, right? Is it just kind of willy-nilly? Does he have good control of the class? Those kind of things. I've seen instructors that like to play a ton of games with their students, and it's almost like when you look on the mat, well, who actually is the instructor, right? Oh, he's on his hands and knees. That's not me.
Yeah.
And I tell people straight up front, because I've been doing this for a long time, I said, I'm a strict instructor. I like to have fun with the kids, but I'm a strict instructor, and I have certain expectations of behavior when they're in my class. And I'll tell them, look at the sign. It says Hiscoe Jiu-Jitsu, not Hiscoe School for Clowns. So, we're here to work. And I'm not afraid to say that to the parents. And I think partially because parents are looking for discipline. There's just seems to be a lack of discipline these days. And I think that's what they're looking for. And fitness, and somebody that's going to hold their kids accountable and behavior wise, or those type of things as well. So, go in, speak to the instructor, find out more about their program. If you've got a shy 7-year-old, well, what class is he going to be in? You're going to be in a class full of, 10 and 11 and 12-year-olds. Like, what is their age groups? What are they, and what are you going to be comfortable with, with for your child, type of thing.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, all good advice. All good advice. And I noticed on your website, which I'll share in the descriptor when this is posted online, it seems like you have a lot of different programs that are focused on children.
Yes.
And do those programs focus more on the Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu aspects of the training, or is it the complete
So
Japanese and
most,
Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu?
yeah. So you're right. We all of probably out of the 160 students that we have right now, I want to say 110, 120 are all in the kids programs, right?
Mhm.
And so I've taken a huge approach to my business model based on kids. So we have a program for our 3 and 4 year olds. It's not a self-defense program. It's a core development program.
Yeah.
So we work on things that are physical and intellectual in nature, and trying to get their development, their core development going. So be it concentration, be it their focus. We do things like, yes, we do open hand strikes, we do kicking, but in the sense where we're using both legs, alternating both legs when they're kicking. So it's working both sides of the brain. I want them counting as they're kicking. So as a 3-year-old, 1, 2, 3, 4. So getting, their counting skills down, recognizing colors and multitasking. So we have them rolling a ball in a certain way to a certain colored cone. So sort of doing little task-based drills and exercises that way. With the 5 and 6 year olds, we do the same but different drills. And we haven't gotten into, with the beginners anyways, into the self-defense aspect yet. We save that for the next group up. So those that are probably closer in the 6 year olds, but keeping it very basic, right? The 7 to 9 year olds, now we're starting into the self-defense aspect, the wrist grabs, the takedowns,
Mhm.
and things that are going to be at their level of comprehension. And then the 10 to 13, now we pick it up a little bit more. And then so at every age group, we sort of make it a little bit more, I don't say difficult, but more age appropriate.
Right, right. Yeah, I don't know if you can have a viable business model if you're actually doing
Oh,
a
kids.
dojo as a business without having a kids program. Like it's near impossible, I think.
Yeah, and I think a lot of people, when I started looking at this, because I reopened, like I said, my full-time school. My son was born so in 2011, and my middle son had been training, and I was just finding it so difficult to go back to the way I used to teach kids, and like with hip throws, like teaching 6 year olds how to do hip throws, and those kind of things. I was just pulling my hair out, and I started doing some research, and found this model, and worked with this model, and really tried to expand it, and into something I had never done before, right? In teaching jujitsu to kids, and that kind of stuff. And I mean, I grew up as a kid doing jujitsu. I taught kids jujitsu and those kind of things, and it just wasn't working. So I needed to find a model that set my school apart from all the other schools in our area, and I think we've done that. So yeah.
Well, I think I've exhausted the questions that I had in mind for today. Is there anything that we haven't covered that you wanted to mention, or anything about that we could talk about with regard to where people can find your business and your dojo and so on?
Yeah. So I'm in, excuse me, I'm in Chilliwack, British Columbia, which is about an hour east of Vancouver, in where they call the Fraser Valley. So Vancouver, Surrey, Langley, Abbotsford, Chilliwack, and we're kind of right on the outskirts of town.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, yeah, that's where I'm at. Our website is hiscoejiujitsu.com. And I'm on Facebook and Instagram and YouTube and all of those things. And with retirement coming up, my focus is going to be to expand my school, or to really to take my school from, not that it's not full-time and not running as a business, but making it more efficient as a business. And the reason I'm not retiring because I don't like the RCMP anymore. I'm not retiring because I don't like my job or my work. It's just 16-hour days for the last number of years has really got me to the point now where it's time to take that next step in life. And as I told Mr. Good many years ago, it's going to be about teaching jiu-jitsu. And it's been my passion for such a long time. And, being able to keep the Can-Ryu style alive and moving forward, and honoring Mr. Sylvain's legacy and whatnot. His uniform hangs in my dojo. His picture hangs in my dojo with pride and honor. And I think that's kind of the next steps in my, in my career. Spending more time with my family, because obviously being away for, teaching and all that kind of stuff takes a toll on the personal family. Thank God I have a understanding, wife and all of that. But that's going to be the next stages of life, is going to be dedicated at making my business more efficient and moving things forward.
Yeah. Well, you're still young yet, and I'll say that because we're very close in age. So I like to think myself as young, but you've got a long retirement ahead of you. But you'll probably be busier in your retirement than you were in your career.
Yeah, probably, but that's okay. It'll all be things that I'm passionate about and want to do, rather than things maybe I don't want to do so much. So
and that's the luxury you have, I guess, right? So that's awesome. Before closing, just wanted to take the opportunity to sincerely thank you for your service as with the RCMP and obviously the work that you've done to continue to train those that are tasked with keeping our community safe and so on. So I don't need to tell you it's an important and often thankless job, but I think it's important to openly acknowledge that fact and how important it is in our society to have well-trained police officers and the like. With that, I also like to say thank you once again, like I said at the outset, for agreeing to participate in this podcast. We've had a couple of conversations leading up to this, and we're aligned in a lot of ways, I think, in our thinking, but also I've learned a few things too. I've been writing notes as we've been going through, so I appreciate the little nuggets of wisdom, and don't be surprised if I reach out to you and say, on this point, can we drill down a little bit more? But no, I appreciate your time and appreciate your willingness to share today, and I'm sure those that are watching this as well will get some good benefit out of this as well. So just wanted to express that.
Yeah, well, thanks for reaching out and making that contact. I truly appreciate it, and I had a great time in our conversation as well, and trying to get that little piece of message across. I think it's important that, yes, we learn how to physically defend ourselves, but I think when that happens, is we need to also be able to kind of be able to defend ourselves with our articulation and our words after the fact, and make people understand why I had to do what I did. And it just so many different contexts. It could be the teenager who's being bullied at school, right, who all of a sudden breaks out and punches somebody, or it could be the housewife who's been a victim of domestic abuse for so many years, who finally does defend herself. Or there's just so many things that that can happen. I think that it's super important that people learn how to articulate their actions after the fact. So
wise point of advice, I think. right there. So, and this is one that I'll probably be asking you for some additional information on, your approach and whatnot. But once again, really appreciate really appreciate the conversation, and it's been a pleasure speaking with you as well.
Thank you very much.